Yo, what's going on at YouTube, and welcome to Goal Line Hockey. It's Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the failed experiment, the failed project for the Ottawa Senators, bringing in Alex Debrincat. So a year and 2 days ago, 367 days to be exact, is how long Alex Debrincat spent in Ottawa. And there's been a lot to this story that we kind of have to break down, but basically, to put it short, poor asset management by Pierre Dorion. That's what this comes down to for the Ottawa Senators. It's a sad day for Senators fans because their idea was, when they brought in Debrincat last summer, that this was the guy that was going to, this was the pivot point for the Senators, from acquiring draft picks and prospects to bringing in guys that can help them win now and make the playoffs and be better next season. That was the mindset a year ago and 2 days. But today, things are a little different up in Ottawa, and we're going to discuss that today. So, looking at the deal itself, July 7th of 2022, the Ottawa Senators acquire Alex Debrincat from the Chicago Blackhawks for a 2022 first-round pick, which was 7th overall, a 2022 second-round pick from Ottawa, which is 39th, and a 2024 third-round pick from Ottawa. Now, 2 of those 3 picks have already been used by the Blackhawks. Obviously, the 2024 third being used in next year's draft. But Debrincat's situation was quite interesting from the start. So you look at a deal he signed back in October of 2019 with the Blackhawks. It was a 3-year deal, $19.2 million. And that was signed by Stan Bowman and the Hawks. That would take him through the 2020-2021 season, all the way up until the 2022-2023 season. So a 3-year deal, $6.4 million per season. Now, that was obviously his most recent contract that ended July 1st of this year. So the idea was his contract's going to go up significantly, right? You look at his base salary, I think that was on purpose. It was $1.1 million the first year, $5.1 the second season, and $9 million last year for Alex Debrincat. So the expectation was his offer is probably going to be similar per season to $9 million per year. It didn't end up working out that way. But when it's all said and done, the deal actually turns out to be pretty good for Debrincat this time around, but it's a lot less than that. And there was a lot of factors why Debrincat didn't sign in Ottawa. The first one, obviously, being ownership. That's what we've all heard about, right? The ownership. Alex Debrincat wants some clarity on the ownership situation. We still haven't found out what's gone on with the ownership. Who is going to be the new owners of the Ottawa Senators? Well, that's since been cleared. We now know that there is going to be a new owner there, and that'll be kind of a passing of the torch from the Melnick era of the Ottawa Senators. So that's no longer an excuse. So what's the ownership issue now? No, that's not the issue. It kind of came down to Debrincat just not wanting to be in Ottawa. And the idea was the ownership thing was kind of a facade and not really what the issue was. And it turns out that was the case. Now, the direction of the Senators is still going to progress toward making the postseason, despite the fact that Debrincat doesn't want to be there. And, to be honest with you, this is going to be a problem for a lot of Canadian teams, not just the Ottawa Senators. They can't take this personally, but the states are the more attractive spot, especially for guys that are from the United States originally. Grew up, hometown in the U.S., grew up in the United States. It's an adjustment moving from Canada. I could say personally, as an American, I would not want to live in Canada, ever. I don't even like the idea of even visiting there. And again, this isn't necessarily a knock on Canada, because I don't want that. I'm not going down that road today. But between the political side of things, the government side of things, and overall just the mentality up there is a little different than the States. And I think a lot of guys that grow up in the States aren't necessarily finding Canada attractive. A huge reason, obviously, is the income tax. If you're making $12 million in Ottawa, that's basically the equivalent of $9 or $10 million in the States because of how much they take out in your taxes. Talking about maybe $2 to $3 million taken out in state tax up in Canada, up in Ottawa. So that's a huge factor for a lot of guys. It's something that doesn't really get talked about. Obviously, the climate. It is extremely cold in Canada, right? Even for a guy from Michigan, from Farmington Hills, Michigan, it is still colder in Canada, right? So as much as Canadians will say, oh, it's a flex, you don't know what cold is, -10 degrees and this and that. That's not a flex. That's something that a lot of people are like, yeah, I'd rather go where it's warm. I'd rather go to Florida, Dallas, Nashville, LA, right? Even New York. At least you're in New York, right? And the idea here is he's from Michigan. So the idea of Detroit, yeah, it's maybe not temperature-wise as good, but he's from the area, and he has that connection, right? So those are the kind of things that we're kind of going against the Senators here in bringing back Alex Debrincat. Now, what they got in return is obviously unacceptable, because when you look at this situation with Debrincat, it's... So here's what they gave up. So what they gave up to acquire Debrincat is a first-round pick, which was the 7th overall pick. That's Kevin Korchinski. That is going to be a top-pairing defenseman in Chicago. That was a tough blow. Paul Ludwinski, he was a second-round pick in this year's draft. Now, this is still a little bit to be determined. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen with him. But last season, in only 47 games with the Kingston Frontenacs, he picked up 34 points in 47 games, 43 points in 67 games last year in Kingston. He looks to be a pretty good prospect, and I would say at this point, has the potential to be a middle six center in the NHL, right? And again, he's 19 years old, so there's still a lot of progression to go for Paul Ludwinski, but there's potential there from the former second-round pick. And then they obviously gave up a third-round pick this year, right? What did they give up this time around, a year and 2 days later? A first-round pick. All right, so there's the swap there. We'll see where those picks lie, but I don't think that's going to be top 10. It's either Boston or Detroit's pick. I don't see either of those being top 10. A fourth-round pick, Dominic Kubalik and Donovan Sebrango. Donovan Sebrango is a former third-round pick in 2020. So there is some hope there. So there's the first and the third round picks back. Still not an even swap, but you get what I'm saying. Kubalik, pretty good center, right? He could be a center, could be a winger, and a fourth round pick. That doesn't equal a top 10 pick, in my opinion. With, I would say, the first round pick and Kubalik and the fourth round pick, basically, that is not the equivalent of a top 10 pick, in my opinion, right? Donovan Sebrango, you could say even swap for the third, but you still don't have the value for the first and the second round pick in that deal. So, I know Dorian, in a tough situation, he didn't want to sign there. There's not much you could really do. But that's a tough blow for the Ottawa Senators, and something that I think Senators fans are going to be looking at for the next couple of years, saying, man, what could have been if Debrincat was here? So at the end of the day, there's nothing you could really do, but the experiment of bringing in Debrincat to try and rebuild this team, get this team going, didn't necessarily work. But they have Jacob Chychrun in the fold, and hopefully things will fall in the right direction that way. He looks to be a good defenseman. That's going to be a good player there. But obviously Debrincat, failed experiment, and we'll see how things go moving forward in Detroit. But let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think that the Red Wings won this trade? I think they did. What is Senators fans? What do you guys think of this deal? Because I think this is kind of an interesting one. I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you again next time.